Welcome to Dream Big Today. My name is Debbie, and this is Thursday, February the 22nd, 2024. And so, if you're waking up this morning and thinking, man, I wonder what I should read today. Well, here, let's just jump into Leviticus and Mark and Psalms and Proverbs. If you're following us with the one-year Bible, you're able to follow along and read what we're reading and enjoy what we're enjoying as we read the word. Now, there's maybe some kind of an issue going on with our AT&T network. I don't know if you're a part of that, but my phone's not working. It says SOS on it. And so something's going on. So I guess it's on the news. I haven't even had the TV on, so you all may know all about it. I don't know. And so anyway, we'll get started here in just a second. I just want to remind you to put your prayer request and your praise report in the chat box. And man, it's just so great to be able to jump in there and pray and praise with you. With everything that you're going through, you're not alone. We're not alone. And we're getting ready to go on our mission trip to Las Vegas. And so Elizabeth and friends some of them are already out there right now. Leslie and I and some other friends are going out today. So keep us all in your prayers and let the right person at the right time cross our paths so we can talk to them about Jesus. And let's just save the world one person at a time. Well, we don't save the world. We just bring the good news to the world. And so welcome, Sherry, Janice, Cheryl, Cindy, Debbie, Nancy. Nancy, it was good seeing you last night. And so I want to start out with my devotion, just a little bit of it. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I got to get into Mark today. But my devotion, it was like perfect for today. Thank you, Jesus, for leading me. Have you even thought about thanking him for leading you in just whatever you're doing? He's leading you step by step through life. I ask you, Jesus, to guide me through this day as I hold your hand in childlike dependence. You know how that was whenever your kiddos were little and they just held your hand and they felt secure. They were with you. They weren't going to fall away from you and get lost. They were holding mom's hand. They were holding dad's hand. That's how we hold Jesus's hand. My future looks uncertain and feels flimsy, even precarious. I know I need to walk by faith, not by sight, believing that you will open up the way before me. I believe. Do you? I believe that everything that he does is opening up a door for me to walk through it and for you to walk through it. This is a good day to increase that faith, to step out in that faith. I exercise that faith because you have it. And so we will jump into this. We start out with Leviticus chapter 13. And I looked at that and I thought, you know what? I really don't like to read about sores on the skin. It's just the worst thing in the world for me to even look at that, let alone read it over and over and over. But what am I supposed to get from this today? Well, these judgments, let me read my little note. These judgments were made with the idea of protecting the community from the outbreak of disease, such as like smallpox, measles, scarlet fever, that might start out with a skin condition or look like it and be considered leprosy. When you think about all of these people together on how they would have to have something that somebody to determine, they'd have to have something in place, and then somebody to determine what that was, somebody that would be schooled and trained. Oh my goodness, by God, how awesome is that? The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, this time he didn't just say to Moses, he spoke to Aaron also. So Aaron was part of that team on that day. And then the detail the detail that they talked about in the quarantine period, the 7 days, and then maybe another 7 days. And yes, Cassie says priests were the first doctors. This was the ones that were trained by God. The job of the priest was to examine all of these skin issues. Leprosy, thank goodness we don't have to deal with that in this day, but there still are countries that have it. But it was a living death where, you know, your parts of your ear would fall off, your nose, your fingers. It just gradually died and fell off. But think about this. Moses was the first leper. What happened? God told him to put his hand inside his cloak and he pulled it out and it was white. Told him to put it back in and he pulled it out and it was normal. Then remember Miriam. She spoke in an improper way and God put leprosy on her. Leprosy, biblically speaking, is a little bit different than what we think of it today. Leprosy here is what God places on somebody for pride or evil speech, whether it's true or false. And whenever I was reading that, I thought, oh man, I don't speak evil at all. But it would be a way of speaking that was true or false that would cause the listener to think less of someone else and is rooted in your plans, your pride, rather than the purposes of God. Now that changes it. Well, I just told the truth about them. Well, but maybe you should have said that's not my story to tell, rather than to say, oh yeah, let me tell you all about Tanya and Judy and Bandy. Let me tell you all about them. Well, if it's not my story, it's third person. So we shouldn't do that. But Miriam had put Moses down saying that, well, why is he so special? We're all prophets. See, she elevated her role. But in this instance where this is starting out, Aaron is included. And they would all have discernment in what was right or what was wrong in going through the examination part. But there's a lot of people, and a lot of people can have a scrape, a scratch, or maybe just a simple fever blister. I get those all the time. And I can't imagine having to step out of my home for 7 days and not be around anybody just to see if it's going to spread or not. So glad that we don't live in this time. But it's like leprosy is like sin. It begins as nothing. It's painless in its first stages. It grows slowly. It often remits for a while and then it returns. It numbs the senses. It causes decay and deformity. It gives a person a repulsive appearance. Doesn't that just make sense whenever you think about what it is and what it does? If you had leprosy, whenever somebody was passing you by, you had to step back and you had to say unclean. You had maybe a bell to ring. There was just so many things for them to know that you are that person infected, because you couldn't get around any of them. But remember, Jesus loved the lepers. In fact, he healed the lepers, as you remember the story, and all of them were excited and went away. I think it was 10 lepers, except one came back, and he asked, where are the other ones? Well, they were healed and they left to go do their thing. When we're healed of something, whether it is physical or emotional, do we just go on about our way like it wasn't a big deal, and then we don't give God the glory? We got to remember the great healer is in charge of you. He's got the number of days for you on this earth already set. And that's all I wanted to say about Leviticus this morning. I'm sure you'll find some more things in there that's interesting. It's all interesting whenever you're digging in through that. But we think, well, how in the world could that have been just crazy like that? Well, we went through COVID. We could call it the COVIDicus because we were all isolated in our houses and we couldn't be around people if we had a fever in case if it was that. So we kind of had a little glimpse into what possibly somebody with a simple fever blister could have experienced. So now let's go to Mark 6, 1 through 29. We've got some lessons to learn in this, and this was so good for me today. It starts out saying Jesus had left that part of the country and returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. Now, let's just stop for a second and think, what has he been doing? Well, whenever we look back in Mark 4, Jesus calmed the storm. In Mark 5, we saw that he sent the demons into the herd of pigs, as well as healing the woman of her bleeding and restoring a girl's life. So there is a lot of things that Jesus has done that got a lot of attention. And so he's got this entourage with him. People are following just everywhere. Now he comes home. Shouldn't that be like a parade that everybody is so glad and say, you be the grand marshal and we'll all come out and cheer you on? Well, it doesn't really seem like that is what happened. It says, the next Sabbath he began teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. They asked, where did this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles, where did he get this? They scoffed. He's just a carpenter. He's just a carpenter. Look how they just degraded him. He's just a carpenter. This was a way of pointing out that Jesus had no theological training. The word carpenter is broader than one that works with wood. God is a carpenter. He knows how to build our lives, and he knows how to finish the job. What did they say next? Son of Mary. He's just a carpenter, son of Mary. That wasn't a compliment. Back in those days, it was contrary to Jewish usage to describe a man as a son of his mother, except in insulting terms. And the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And his sisters live right here among us. They're saying, we know the whole family. We know everything about them. These old neighbors knew little enough about him to think they knew everything about him. How hard is it to go back home? You haven't been there for years and years and years. You're not that same teenage kid that drove fast and didn't stop at stoplights and threw your trash out the window. And that's what they remember, because you graduated from high school and you left never to come back until like 20 or 30 years later at a high school reunion. Or maybe you're coming back to preach the word. And they say, who is this? We know their family. One of my little notes is, we don't have to be honored or respected to be useful for God. If people who knew you don't respect your Christian work, don't let their rejection stop you now. He's just a carpenter, just Mary's son. Then Jesus told them a prophet is not honored anywhere except in his own hometown. I messed up on that. A prophet is honored everywhere except in his own town, among his relatives and his own family, and because of their unbelief. He couldn't do any miracles among them except to place his hand on a few sick people and heal them. Verse 6, and he was amazed at their unbelief. We have to know that we know and believe that we believe that he can heal. If you doubt, what happens? Your unbelief may be the thing that stops you from moving forward. He was amazed. This was in respect to God's principle of partnership with man. God may work with no belief, but not with unbelief. So, in these verses, traveling light kept the disciples dependent on God. So they went out and preached. Some of the most effective preaching happens outside of the church. He sent them out 2 by 2, giving them authority to cast out evil spirits. Take nothing. He allowed them to wear sandals, not to take a change of clothes. When followers of Jesus are one-on-one with others testifying, it's personal, it's intimate. And that's why I say this is so timely for us that's going on this trip. Is I'm traveling lighter than I've ever traveled in my life, and we're going to be gone several days. I'm taking a backpack. It's a big one, though. Go out and meet somebody. There is somebody that I am supposed to connect with. Leslie's supposed to connect with. Everybody on this team is supposed to connect with somebody. It says wherever you go, wherever. Now, we could easily go into our own community and do the same thing. But that's like going into your hometown. Are they even going to acknowledge that Jesus lives in you? That you are not who you once were? Sometimes it's just that holds people back. That holds you back. But we're only told to come and give the good news. We're not told to make sure you change their lives before you leave. That's not it. They love just to present the message. Let me see what I wrote. Oh, no. They were just to present the message and not to change the minds. And that's what we have to remember that. We have to remember that. And so in the King James Version of verse 12, I like that it says, so they went out and preached that people should repent. And then again, they cast out demons and healed many sick and anointed them with oil. So, in verse 7, let me back up to there. He called his 12, verse 7, and he called his 12 disciples. In one, well, I lost my train of thought. So let's just scratch that. We won't go down that road because I lost my path. And so, in where it says in verse 9, he allowed them to wear sandals. God told Moses to take off his sandals because he was on holy ground. Jesus tells the 12 to wear sandals, maybe because they are going to unholy ground. What's your thoughts on that? Don't put on 2 tunics. They were going out as servants. Royalty, those in authority wore 2 tunics. And also, the outer tunic would give them warmth, but Jesus would provide all their needs. Just thought that was also good. So now then, we get down to verse 14, and Mark jumps to talk about Herod Antipas. I guess how you say that. The king the king soon heard about Jesus because everybody was talking about him. They've heard all of this stuff. And he's thinking, this must be John the Baptist, raised from the dead. Only he can do such thing. And so they've had their discussion, but when Herod heard about Jesus in verse 16, he said, John, the man I beheaded has come back from the dead. Fear goes all over his whole being. He is shaking in his shoes. He's got goosebumps. The hair is standing up on the back of his neck. Herod sent. Now we go back to the backstory of why he is in fear. This is the backstory starting in 17. Herod had sent soldiers to arrest and imprison John as favor to Herodias. Okay, so let's talk about this family. And I had to write it down and so I could make a list of it. Herod the Great had sons. One was Aristobulus. He was this was his son by his second wife. And then he had Herod Philip, who was a son by his third wife. And then he had Herod Antipas, son by his fourth wife. So the son by the second wife had a daughter named Herodias. And Uncle Herod Philip married her. And then Uncle Herod Antipas decided he wanted the other Uncle Herod's wife, so he takes Herodias as his wife. Oh my word. There's nothing good that can happen out of this. So John had told him, that's not right. You're not supposed to marry your brother's daughter, your uncle. You're not, I mean, there's all kinds of things wrong about that. It was against God's law. So what happened, Herodias bore a grudge against John and wanted to kill him. So what happens when we have a grudge? When something is eating at you day in, day out. Herodias owned it. She possessed it until it owned her. All she could think about was John. She hated him with a passion. Herod, on the other hand, respected him. He was a good and holy man. And so it says he protected him. And Herod, I love this, was greatly disturbed whenever he talked with John. Even so, he liked to listen to him. Why was he disturbed? He knew he was living in a immoral life. John probably was just speaking the truth to him every chance he got and told him, you're not supposed to do that. That's wrong. This is what God says. And not everybody wants to be corrected, do they? They kind of enjoy that life that they're in. They don't want to hear how you should live. And so here comes the birthday of Herodias' daughter. And he gave a birthday party for her. She's dancing all around. It's like, TikTok on steroids. And everybody likes what they're seeing. And so here Herod says, ask me for anything that you like. I will give it to you. I will give you whatever you ask for, up to even half of my kingdom. Now, the funny thing about that is, as a ruler under Roman authority, Herod had no kingdom to give. The offer of this half kingdom was Herod's way to say he would give her almost anything she wanted. So here mom comes. Here's her opportunity when the daughter comes to say, what should I ask for? She's finally going to be able to feel what she's been waiting on this whole time since John has been condemning them for their lifestyle. It's her opportunity. Ask for the head of John the Baptist on a tray. Oh, I mean, just everything, everything. The girl went back to the king and said, I want the head of John the Baptist right now on their tray. Grudges results in death. And what a horrible thing. Today it would be horrible to even see this on a movie that you're watching, let alone be this teenage girl and have somebody actually bring you a tray with John's head. She knew who he was. This is even worse. It's a person that you've heard of, and he was around you. When you hold a grudge, it dominates you, just like it dominated her. It deprives you. Job 21:25 says, another person dies in bitter poverty, never having tasted good life. Holding a grudge defiles you. In Hebrews 12:15, it says, watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many. And then also, it was spoken of in Jonah 2:8. And then finally, holding a grudge devastates you. Don't disassociate yourself from the human aspect. This mom traumatized her daughter. The king deeply regretted. He couldn't believe that she didn't ask for half the kingdom. Why wouldn't she ask for half the kingdom? That would have been a once in a lifetime opportunity. But because of the grudge and the unforgiveness of mom, she asked for what mom wanted. A horrible, horrible scene. The soldier beheaded John in prison, brought his head on a tray, and gave it to the girl, who took it to her mother. When John's disciples heard what happened, they came to get his body and buried it in a tomb. It doesn't say in this part, did they get the head too? I don't know. But when we talk about the grudges and the resentments and things that we hold back, we ought to think about forgiveness. Corey ten Boom said, forgiveness is the key that unlocks the door of resentment and the handcuffs of hatred, breaks the chains of bitterness and the shackles of selfishness. If you've ever seen a country church with a bell and the ringer in the steeple, you have to remember that to get the bell ringing, you have to tug a while. When it begins to ring, you just have to maintain the momentum. As long as you keep pulling the bell, it keeps ringing. Forgiveness is letting go of the rope. It's just that simple. But when you let go, the bell rings, but it starts losing momentum, and finally it ceases. We've got to keep stirring up those feelings of resentment, of grudges, of everything like that, because it will make you sick. It will make you so tense that you just can't hardly focus on anything good. If you have feelings like that, then take a internal assessment of what are you doing? Always bump it up against Philippians 4:8. Is this true? Is this worthy? Is this admirable? Is this loving? Go through that whole verse and check it off. If it meets any of that criteria, oh, well, there you go. But you know what? It's not going to, because Jesus said to love one another. And he said to forgive. How many times? 7 times 70? That means to forgive forever. We don't hold grudges, folks. We are to love people and be with them and support them and teach them the good news. You're not gonna go out and be the Debbie Holy Spirit. You're gonna go out and give them the word to let them connect with the Holy Spirit. So, friends, I am so glad that you joined us today, and my bags are packed. Leslie will be over here in a little bit to ride with me, and we will be heading out and we're gonna do our Monday noon nuggets while we are out there waiting to fly back home. And so if hopefully all of that will work out. But you have a blessed day.